What might education look like if the experiences students have is completely devoid of status, gender, location?
Yeah.
What might that actually look like? And what if this notion of paying for quality is completely removed, where all of us have a right to the best-in-class education? We believe it's becoming increasingly possible to do so. We've seen, I guess, over the last few years with this massive expansion of AI and AI-related tools. We're also seeing the contextualization of tools, but what we're also seeing is a lot of the existing systems, school systems, they are getting smarter about embedding AI in their own work.
Welcome back to Wise on Air, the show where we talk to the world's leading minds on the future of education. My name is Bassem Hijazi, producer of the show. For over 3 decades, the XPRIZE has been pushing the boundaries of innovation through their unique competition model. What started with space exploration has now expanded into 7 domains, including education and learning. But can the same approach that helped commercialize space travel help us transform our education systems? In this episode, we sit down with Alexander Nicholas, Executive Vice President of Learning and Society at the XPRIZE. Drawing from his experience at the Gates Foundation and the XPRIZE, Alexander shares insights on how prize competitions could catalyze transformative solutions in education. Alexander also shares his vision of democratized education, where high-quality learning becomes accessible to all, regardless of status or location. Let's join WISE director and host of this episode, Elias Fulful, in conversation with Alexander to explore how these competitions might help us reimagine the future of learning.
Alex, such a pleasure to be with you in Los Angeles. We're actually slightly outside of LA in a town called Agora Hill.
Yes.
You're hosting an amazing event. This is the Visionary XPRIZE annual event. But the 2 days prior to the Visionary Forum, you're bringing together an amazing group of smart people. Just tell us a little bit about what is XPRIZE, first of all, the XPRIZE Foundation, and then we're going to get to the role of the Brain Trust and everyone that is involved in these amazing 2 days.
No, absolutely, and thank you for having me. So the best way to describe XPRIZE is that we are a global platform where we are trying to seed innovation and trying to solve problems across multiple sectors. So we use a prize model where we define problems, clearly define problems, such that it inspire innovators across the globe. Then we build a partnership network of folks who are interested in a problem space. And then we actually invite innovators from across the world to help us solve this problem, help us move the world forward, help us move humanity forward. So XPRIZE, we have been doing that for over 30 years now. And interestingly, it's our...
So we're celebrating 30 years.
We are celebrating 30 years of XPRIZE.
It's the best event this year.
It is it's a special moment. I mean, what's also interesting is 30 prizes in 30 years.
Wow.
And so we tend to be very selective in terms of the kinds of prizes we do. So we don't want to just solve a problem and the problem is kind of partially solved. We really think about how do we actually drive innovation, how do we actually change the sector, and also how do we actually change the problem space.
And 30 years ago, maybe also for the context of our audience, this started with one main theme, or what you call domain, and it has evolved over time. Just for, I think, the curiosity of our audience, can you give us a bit of history where it started and how it has evolved to what is today, I think, 6 main domains? Seven main domains.
Yeah. No, it's actually a very interesting and an exciting story that I love telling. And because prior to this, I was at the Gates Foundation. So Gates Foundation, we had a particular model. And so I joined XPRIZE 2.5 years ago, actually, in part that I was actually inspired by their journey and inspired by their story. So there's the XPRIZE that started 30 years ago, but it actually goes back like over 100 years.
100 years.
100 years. So XPRIZE, so the inspiration for XPRIZE is, we've only been around for 30 years.
That's interesting.
But the inspiration for the XPRIZE, our co-founders are Greg Marinak and Peter Diamandis, who you know. But the inspiration for XPRIZE came from Charles Lindbergh. And there was the Orteig Prize. So
Very interesting. Okay.
So first innovator to fly from New York to Paris.
To Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason why that was really inspiring for Peter and Greg is that it captivated the world's attention. It focused innovators, but also the inspiration actually led to a sort of a renewed interest in the commercial aviation. So commercial aviation actually took off
after that prize.
After this prize. So
yeah.
there's a bit of a story. There's a story and there's a power in a prize where it's not just framed around the actual innovation itself, but there's a narrative that can be inspiring and exciting for everyday citizen.
That's powerful because it transcends in a way just an idea that someone want to create. It has to have a dimension of a societal change or a societal transformation or disruption for the better good of the majority of people, basically.
No, absolutely. And so our first XPRIZE, so inspired by the Orteig Prize, our first XPRIZE was the Ansari Prize, where it was to commercial space travel. Prior to that, and frankly, actually, it made sense that only governments alone should be flying to space. And what we sometimes call this is a tightly held assumption, and it's a very rational assumption. But we actually at XPRIZE, we wanted to push on that. We believe there is an opportunity for commercial space travel. And so we launched the Ansari XPRIZE. 8 years later, it was won. It actually captivated the world's attention. And it actually transformed commercial...
The whole industry. That is no longer just governmental. That is actually the people driving the change in this industry are no longer just the NASA or other institution around the world.
Absolutely. And so it's similar to the Orteig Prize. The inspiration and the innovation were kind of came together in a really powerful way. And so everyone was inspired by that. It's like, wow, I didn't really appreciate that there's a non-governmental pushing the boundaries of space. It just seemed, I always thought that was, that's in the realm of government. So there were a couple of big takeaways that became really broadly applicable across all of the different domains we work in. One is the power, back to the power in inspiration. There's also a power in focusing sort of the cognitive capital of the world on problems that matter and problems that can be solved. We take on the role at XPRIZE that you've experienced the last couple of days is how do we clearly frame problems and invite innovators, researchers, academics, policymakers into this space to help us think through how do we actually solve this problem? How do we move the world forward? So,
and so now you're contributing to moving the world in 7 domains.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the 7. And keep the learning and society to the end. So just given the 7, because this is an education show, so we want to focus on that. We know that this is across the board, right?
Yes.
But just tell us what are the 7s or maybe if you can do based on the timeline of how these 7 have been created, but still keep learning and society to the end.
I will absolutely give learning and society special treatment. And so what's interesting, a couple of things. One is we didn't really formalize the domain model until recent.
So it's haven't been an evolution of over the years. You've been adding domain.
It was more around, I would say, in our first couple decades, the focus was on focusing on the problems that matter, and not necessarily on a domain per se.
Excellent.
We evolved to the domain model only 3 years ago. because we wanted to do deeper work and more sustaining work in each of the different spaces. And the way we do that is actually build that ecosystem of innovators and partners so that we can do that work consistently. So what we don't want it to be a random walk where one year you're doing a prize on health, but the education and the learning is completely ignored for 5 years. Then you do a prize on food and water and waste or climate. Then you kind of wait. So we don't want it to be a random walk. We want it to be a very intentional process.
An organic process.
Exactly, where we're constantly, okay, how are we solving the problems in education and learning in workforce? How are we solving the problems in climate and energy? How are we solving issues around health? How do we think about access in food? How do we keep on pushing the boundaries of space? Where are the opportunities there for us to focus on?
That's excellent. So biodiversity and conservation. Health.
Yes.
Food, water, waste.
We have a deep tech domain.
Deep tech.
Yes, where it's deep tech, but we actually do have a prize now in partnership with Google and JESDA around quantum computing.
Excellent.
So there's climate and energy, there's food, water, waste, there's space and exploration, and of course health and learning and society. Yeah.
You brought together really an amazing group of people. I have been enjoying the conversation, the networking, but also most people here are quite influential in their domain and yet very humble, very down to earth. Everyone in this room yesterday was like a kid. Because they're really pushing to, to try to collectively think, okay, there's so many, priorities to fix in education. But of course, the whole debate yesterday was around, okay, we have issues in empathy, we have issues with migration, we have issues with skills. I love the debate yesterday. How do you think of bringing a group of people together? Because it takes a lot of curation and.
No, that's a great question, and I couldn't be more pleased with that sort of collection of innovators and thinkers, but also just good, humble people who are really focusing on the right things,
which is rare in tech nowadays,
and with the right motivation. I mean, you're absolutely right. And so. So this domain, when I thought about pulling this group together, I wanted to be fairly diverse. We were pushing on the geographical diversity, but also wanted to push on the expertise diversity as well, and their focus area. So couple exciting things happened this year, and one of the prize concepts was this notion of empathy. And so you saw an AI expert working with a psychologist to push us to think about how can we get better at empathy, and where are there opportunities to create solutions to address this sort of empathy crisis in society. That's sort of a rare combination of experts in their respective domains. So we try to push on the tech side. We try to push on folks who are on a sort of a systems thinking. We push on folks who see a lot of things. So we have, at least someone like you see a lot of innovation across a lot of different spaces, and you can start to see, okay, I can see this piece combining with this piece and this piece combining with this piece. So we need folks who actually take a very broad view, a very holistic
point of view.
Absolutely.
And a global point of view.
And a very global point of view.
I've been pushing the little, guys, don't think about it only from a North perspective, or we have to consider that if we don't fix issues related to the gap that is increasing between the North and the South, then we're not solving the problem. But I'm happy that I've been playing this role in many conferences that I've been attending.
And I love it. I think that is I think that's so important because at XPRIZE, we aspire for the solutions to be globally relevant. And I would say, particularly in this domain, where the solutions are so contextual. So, so in energy, the physics works in all geographies.
Yeah. I've seen some amazing ideas.
Yeah, and the physics worked. In this domain, where it's different, but also it provides a level of richness to the kinds of solutions that can be generated, where it's very contextual, it's very human-centered.
Yeah.
It adds layers and layers of complexity, but it's actually what people can easily connect to. So we have the additional challenge of making or creating prizes or framing prizes that are relevant not just to the U.S. context or just the global North context, but really think about the global South.
Yeah.
But that's why it's important for us to bring in folks like you and others to help push the thinking, but also just as a bit of a check, because you saw us yesterday. Sometimes we start with a global view.
Yeah, and then
it starts, it narrows. So unless you get someone that's like pushing and pulling, it's like, hey, I think we're down this very So that's why it works.
I actually appreciated that. And I'm trying to understand this experimentation, right? Because you kind of you were very smart in putting pressure in without saying much about these ideas because they go into the final round now. But you also thought about, okay, someone is going to this direction, the other is this direction, but there's actually a way to merge them. And that exercise is quite incredible because these two people were completely thinking of a different direction and bringing them together to say, look, you're solving a problem that is actually linked to this problem.
Yeah.
Work together.
Yeah.
And make magic happen.
Yeah.
And that wasn't easy, that conversation at the beginning.
It was not an easy conversation, but I so appreciate their openness.
Yes.
Even with appropriate level of pushback, because as you know, those two teams, they have been working on their problem or how to frame the problem for a few months now. And in true XPRIZE, it's like, hey, you have 2 hours to merge and reimagine your problem space. That was greeted with a lot of energy,
and they won.
And they won.
They won the passage to the final.
They did.
So
because they have two powerful concepts. One is this, the notion of both refugees, but also just migrants, where it will increase even more, where the need to relocate, whether you're voluntarily or being forced to relocate.
People movement in the next 20, 30 years is going to increase significantly. It will increase significantly for economic reason, but also climate change reason and more conflict. Yeah. So it is such an important societal.
Yeah. It's wickedly important. And you couple that, there's the need for movement, and you couple that with the how do people show up in new spaces and get access to employment opportunities or work so that they can be an active contributing member of society. Yeah. Because it's not just about getting jobs, but it's folks taking care of their families. It's about that sort of a sense of worth. But it's also how that new country or new community, how they see them.
Yes.
And so we saw how important it is to link these two ideas, but also we wanted to create space where they both can tell their own story. Yeah. And so part of even the sort of the linking of them together is that we wanted to make sure that we provide a platform
Yeah.
for both ideas to be shared.
Yeah. No, it was powerful, and I'm so happy that they won despite the 2 hours, last minute.
No,
How do you define it with XPRIZE success? Maybe it's a bit of a technical, but we just want to understand some of the metrics, some of the outcome, the desirable outcome you're looking for. So give us a sense of.
Yeah, so it's an awesome question. So and I'll give a broad answer, then give you a specific answer. So in terms of the broad answer, and you're seeing some of that over the last couple of days, where if we are going to run a prize, let's say in climate, let's say in learning, we want to be absolutely clear on what's that desired future state. What are we trying to achieve? And sometimes it's what we're trying to achieve it's more of a demonstration of a new possibility.
Yeah.
And sometimes what we're trying to achieve is the demonstration of scalability of something. In my domain, or it's in learning and society, what we have seen and the measures that are becoming increasingly important is that we need more than demonstration of possibility. We need demonstration of scalability. And so what that means is that there's a technical component. So a lot of the work that we do, we want to make sure that we're creating a good product. The product is efficacious. If it's a learning product, we have evidence that it's actually producing the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that XPRIZE does, is that we invest heavily in validation. Sort of a quick example.
So the research and validation and
Yes.
the learning outcome that is coming out of this.
Yeah, so one quick example, about sort of a decade ago, we ran the Global Learning Prize, where the focus was on creating a product, an open source product that can teach literacy and numeracy to young learners, and young learners who have had zero or very limited access to any sort of formal educational instruction.
Wow, okay. And that's going to be an ambitious one because the numbers are very high.
Yeah, so we did that, but the focus there was on the actual product side, because you got to remember, 10 years ago, the edtech space, the evidence for learning outcomes was very, very thin, especially when you get into the global south. So during that time, you just had a lot of products that weren't evidence-based. And so what we wanted to do is actually provide the evidence base for edtech products improving learning outcomes. So so XPRIZE we did one of the most comprehensive and actually first RCT trials in Tanzania with over 170 villages, over 3,000 learners, in partnership with the World Food Program. And Google provided the tablets, which is a pretty global and comprehensive trials where innovators, or the 5 finalists, they provided us their products, and those products were independently tested with students over 18 months. So we followed the students for over 18 months, assessed learning, because once again, we wanted there to be evidence-based that this product, or which one of the products is getting the best result, the best outcome. Yes. So we try to keep that, set a pretty high bar in terms of the kinds of products, the kinds of tools that result from an XPRIZE, because we want that is our brand. But also we do it to provide support to our innovators. So for instance, after that competition, the finalists, all of a sudden, they have access to an RCT trial results that they could take to innovators. They could take to partners and say,
we can reach an amazing number.
Yes.
The scale is
Yes.
great with
And 1 billion, they were one of the co-winners,
yeah.
and they have actually scaled, and they with
This is the project that reached the 10 million. The 10
one
million
of the project,
actually,
yes,
one of the project,
and so they have amazing scale.
Yeah.
They have a huge focus throughout this sub-Saharan region.
Yeah.
Reaching millions of students.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, so just absolutely incredible success. But so there's a success of that team, but there's the success in the field where we actually, that prize created new standards for what the performance of edtech products.
I've been having this question, the funding, before even the funding step, when the Brain Trust Committee propose ideas, they match it with what we call, budget purse, right? And I've seen some numbers ranging from 10 million to 250 million. on which basis and with your experience, running this program for 2-3 years, how some of the brain trust end up, matching those numbers?
Yeah. So
and have you seen the initial numbers
match?
Reaching if they win, they reach the funding that is going to be promised?
Yeah. So, amazing question. So there's a strong likelihood that the numbers that are will be different in the end. Because what we want to do is provide enough funding of a prize purse where it's a motivator.
Yeah.
It gets the world excited around the competition. So we do that deep assessment. Sometimes it doesn't require. I don't think we have a $119 million prize. I don't think we have done a $200 million prize. Okay. So, we want to make sure that because we have enough funding to motivate innovators, but also we know innovators are motivated, beyond any sort of a prize purse.
Yeah.
People are here because they care deeply about the topics.
But it's important to know that if we're trying to solve a grand challenge, we're gonna the XPRIZE are gonna go and find serious people, donors, funders, because this problem deserves this amount of money to be solved. So we need to give ourselves the right resources to achieve things, right? Otherwise, it's just going to be an echo chamber conversation of, we want to achieve this, but we don't have the funding for it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We do invest heavily in the in fundraising for prizes because it's like these, this should be done. This should be in the world.
Yeah.
And so for some of them, we may not hit. We may not hit $200 million, and $200 million might not be necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
But what it does communicate is the level of importance, and the level of ambition that sits beneath the $200 million number. So we finalize the actual number during the prize design process. So what typically happens is we go through this design process. We vote on it. A lot of really smart and capable and innovative people weigh in on the value of the prize to the world, and then we get to a place with a prioritized set of prizes. And then where there's interest, it's like, I want to move this forward. We then go into what we call a prize design stage, where we spend around 6 months or so actually doing deep research to design the prize. So once again, we try not to do too many prizes. We try to right size the amount of prizes we do because it's a fairly heavy pretty intense
Process,
lift, and it's not a 1-year prize.
It's most of them, the average is 5 years.
Yeah. And so they go for a while. So it requires really long-term commitment. But also when you're getting into a place where you're doing testing and evaluation, and often the testing and evaluation is not done in the US, we actually need to secure partners. If we're going to be testing in Tanzania, we need to secure partners in Tanzania. We need to actually build the assessment framework because we have to communicate that very clearly to innovators on what you're going to be evaluated on. And there is also the piece of recruiting teams, because one of the things we do really well at XPRIZE, because we have such a pretty massive network of innovators. They get very interested and they track us very closely on the kinds of prizes, the kinds of competitions that we're putting out. And often we get innovators who aren't necessarily an expert on that topic, but they have an adjacent model or technology that they believe that might be applicable for this problem space. So they want to get in and really start thinking about it.
You've said in the past, you stated the following, basically: high quality learning is demonetized, delocalized, and woven into the fabric of society. What role do you see technology and AI playing in achieving this, specifically in education?
No, terrific question. So in many ways that was inspired by our founder, Peter Diamandis. And he used the example of the internet. So regardless of your socio-economic status, you generally experience the internet the same way. There isn't, you might get a little bit higher, a little faster there, but it's
generally speaking,
the access and the content is generally the same. So it doesn't matter
except if you're in a place where there's censorship, but generally speaking, it's
exactly
open to everyone.
It's generally so. The provocation there is, what might education look like if the experiences students have is completely devoid of status, gender, location? What might that actually look like? And what if is this notion of paying for quality is completely removed, where all of us have a right to the best-in-class education? What might that world look like? We believe it's becoming increasingly possible to do so. And technology will be an important driver or enabler for that to happen. We've seen and I guess over the last few years, with this massive expansion of AI and AI-related tools. But what we're starting to see is there is the proliferation of tools, but we're also seeing the contextualization of tools as well. So at first, you get a lot of innovators who want to do really interesting things. But what we're also seeing is a lot of the existing systems, school systems, they are getting smarter about embedding AI in their own work. You do have some systems that are essentially ahead of the pack. But what it does is pushes on, if you're at the student level, you have access to tools that your parents didn't have access to. All of a sudden, you can have a coach or tutor. There is a tool for you to have a very personalized experience based on the questions that you might have. Obviously, there's the issue of everything you're hearing may not be fully accurate, but we can also say that tools are actually getting better. But I think what's more important than the specific information that's coming out of the tools is the framework for thinking. And I think ultimately that's what we want students to have. You're starting to see students having a more structured way of engaging content, And those tools are actually providing frameworks for students for thinking about problems. So on a student level, their experiences are changing, and essentially there's a massive opportunity to change the student experience even more. On the system level, schools are seeing opportunities. They're still fairly slow. But once again, I said some are actually ahead of the pack, where they can think about the learning experiences they're providing in those systems. The aspiration has always been, and I love this example or this framing by Todd Rose, where he started with this example of the fighter pilots, and he was sort of this very quickly. He said in 1952, the Air Force noticed this this unacceptable amount of mistakes and accidents, and a lot of the accidents were essentially attributed to pilot errors. And ultimately, a researcher came in and determined that it was an issue of the cockpit. And the reason why it was an issue of the cockpit, it was because the cockpit were designed based on the average size of a pilot. But if you actually look at average based on a number of different dimensions, where it's torso, arm length, height, shoulder, they discovered of the 4,000 pilots they look at, not zero actually fell in this notion of average on every dimension. So he talked about this notion of jaggedness. If you have this, imagine sort of this straight line as being the sort of the average, and you have multi dimensions of height, weight, torso, arm length, shoulders. No one
was paying attention to all these details.
Yes. Well, also, and no one actually hits everyone. No one's average on every dimension. And the massive innovation was actually adjustable cockpits. And if you look at learning, it's kind of the same way. If you think about our own learning profiles, so you think about different dimensions of learning, sort of curiosity, cognitive, spatial, creativity, attention, interest. No one fits. No one is average on everything. And so once again, it gets us back to this notion of this jagged profile. What technology can allow us to do is to actually address this issue of our own personal jaggedness, where we're average on some things and we're kind of skewed on others. It actually can help us address this our own personal jaggedness. So I think that's the big hope.
Powerful.
That's the big hope, and that's the big excitement with technology.
We need an XPRIZE for education reform.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
It's easier to go to the space, I think, than to reform the education system.
I would agree. I would agree.
Last question, Alex. Looking ahead to year 2050, what gives you the most hope for the future of education and its potential to create positive change?
No, that's such a terrific question again. A couple of things. One is I'll start with students. I think students want something different. They know what they're experiencing.
From early ages.
They know what they're, for a lot of our students, they know what they're experiencing in the class doesn't fully align with what they need in the world or what's happening in the world. And so we're seeing more and more students having a voice, and they are using their voice to demand something different. On the other side, I think there's the increased recognition by systems that for us to have a healthy, sustainable planet, to us to have healthy people that are able to work with each other, healthy governance within our systems, we need the educational experiences that we provide to students. We need to prepare them for these kinds of experiences. And I think a lot of our systems know that they're falling short. So I think just the the recognition that we need something different,
Yeah.
and the searching for something different. I think it's a really powerful place to start.
Yeah, it is powerful, and I think we have no choice
Yeah.
but to push these changes, because either at the level of if you talk about empathy and all that,
Yeah.
we're hitting very depressing numbers when kids are more depressed,
Yeah.
because because whatever they're learning also putting pressure on them, but also the whole concept of lifelong learning,
Yeah.
education to employment, everything is needing change and transformation
Yes.
to have hopefully a much better outcome for the society.